Hello everyone, it's Monday the 15th of February and welcome to episode 107 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I'm your host Ben Eagle. We're talking branding on the show today and I'll introduce my guest in a bit, but before then we're going to run the news feature, which I must admit we haven't caught up with in a few weeks. So here are some of the latest food farming and countryside stories. In the news this week, hundreds of thousands of farmers in India, the majority of them Sikh and from the northern Indian states of the Punjab and Haryana, have been protesting against the introduction of a series of agricultural laws by the Indian government, which cover a range of measures, in particular regarding how crops can be sold. There is widespread opposition to the ruling, and unions are refusing to move until the laws are repealed. Closer to home, NFU Scotland has a new president who was elected at the union's AGM last Friday. Martin Kennedy is an upland livestock farmer from Aberfeldy in Perthshire and was elected unopposed. In his first speech as president, he emphasised the need for a profitable agricultural sector in Scotland. And finally, despite rising demand, especially from China, which is rebuilding its national pig herd in the wake of the African swine fever outbreak, global feed wheat prices have been falling. Supply has been helped by projections for a record crop in Kazakhstan, offsetting falls in Pakistan and Argentina. It remains far too early to tell what will happen with the UK crop this year, but due to the increase in area planted this autumn, it's been reported as being likely that national yield will be closer to the 5-year average, certainly compared with last year. And that is the news for now. In the news. We're now going to turn to today's feature, which is all about food and drinks branding. My guest is Richard Horwell, who is the Managing Director of Brand Relations, a specialist food and drinks branding agency based in London, whose work includes product development through to marketing, branding and design. I asked Richard to start by introducing his company and explain what they do.
Meet the Farmers Friends.
Okay, we've been around since 2007. Over that time, I've been behind over 100 food and drink brands. We've kind of niched ourselves with predominantly drinks, but a bit of food, etc. We started off as a marketing company to help sort of smaller brands to get traction, to be able to get listings, etc.
Yep.
Then that kind of bled over to situations where international companies from Europe or around the world or whatever wanted to come into the UK market, because the UK market is kind of the benchmark of Europe. And so their messaging and their branding, etc., just didn't really communicate with the UK audience. So we'd help them with the rebranding and then help them launch into the UK market. During that period of time, I launched my own brand and I put that into the market, sold it all over the world. And then 6 years later, sold it to a Dutch billionaire. And then now what we do is we tend to help people actually develop the products from scratch. So if somebody's got an idea, they come in to see us and we help to nurture it right the way through to coming up with the recipe, the branding, the brand name, all the marketing material, everything to get it in front of the buyers. And then we help them get it in front of the buyers.
What drives you personally? Why did you go into this in the first place?
Well, years ago, for those older listeners, I developed the 4-minute wine cooler that chills a bottle of wine in 4 minutes. And then that was a B2B type style business. And B2B is quite a hard sell, because we were selling these machines, the refrigeration machines that are working, and then you'd wait for them to break down and they'd buy another one, and that could take years. So I developed a domestic one for the home, which in 1999 I won Electrical Product of the Year award for.
Right.
And that taught me about FMCG, fast moving consumer goods. And I thought, this is great, because no matter what you sell people, there's more and more and more and more and more people to sell to. And then they break it or they come back and it's repeat business. And it was a completely new market. And at that stage, I sold my business, the chiller business, and moved to America. And there it was just FMCG to the extreme.
In terms of startups, take me through some of your experiences and perhaps on a personal level, what are some of the things that you've learned over the years?
Startups, it's a very difficult one because people come in here with rose-colored glasses as to what's going to happen. They'll sit at home, come up with an idea and say, this is brilliant. My granny loves it. Well, they're going to love it because, not many people are going to tell you the truth. I suppose, honestly, when people come in, I'll tell them the truth, whether they want to hear it or not. In my defense, 100% of the time I've been right when I'm saying what they're doing will fail. They've been working at it for ages and they get upset and shout and scream at me and leave. But it's better to do that because you can spend a lot of money in this industry without going anywhere. So one of the things I always say to people, and I'm emphasizing about startups, is research, is to understand the market you're going into, who is going to buy it and why they're going to buy it and what occasion they're going to buy it. And once you understand those sort of things, you can get everything right so that you've got a better chance of success. I mean, most products, whether it's food and drink, electrical, or whatever it is, it's a white noise out there. And I'm sure, the farmers themselves will find that whether you're doing milk, wheat, or whatever you're doing, it's a real white noise. So you've got to do something that has a point of difference and that you can scream from the rooftops and people will listen.
Yeah. Last year, it was, as we know, for multiple reasons, quite a unique one. But in doing the research for this particular episode, 2020 had more new business startups than any year previous. Why do you think that was?
Well, there's a lot of people who are sitting at home, having, no longer going into the office. They're sitting at home going, I don't want to do this anymore. They're starting to reevaluate their lives. I mean, you have people dying around you. You have people thinking, well, I wanted, but this isn't what I wanted to do in my life. And so they're sitting down thinking, I want to change a career. So they're racking their brain for ideas. And the one thing that during COVID that was recession proof was food and drink. Yeah. Everybody was queuing up to buy it, whereas lots of other businesses were going to the door. We've had wholesalers that we speak to have a 300% increase in business. Food and drink is booming in this country.
And in terms of let's turn towards branding and specifically food and drinks branding. Is there anything that's different you think about starting a new food and drinks business as opposed to another kind of business? And then taking that a bit further as well, whether there's anything different about starting a new food and drinks business in a rural area as opposed to somewhere like London?
Not really. I think your average consumer, when they buy food or drink, wants to know exactly what they're getting. Now that with other things like vacuum cleaners and stuff like that, that's a lot easier to be able to compare. With food or drink, I find that quite a few people try to think that if they've got a brand name, probably not Coca-Cola, but if they've got a big brand name, that the brand name will sell it. It's not that. They want to know what they're buying, whether they're buying cakes or what's in the cakes, or and because it is such a congested industry. There's so many products coming out all the time, and so many people, trying to rally for position in the fridges or the shelves or whatever. You've got to make it as clear as possible, and you've got to be able to shout out, "This is who I am," and I want to shout to the buyers, to the consumer that will buy your product. So you've got to make sure that you communicate to the consumer that you have analyzed will buy your product, and you've got to communicate exactly what you are and what you include and why they should buy it. And one of the most expensive words in this industry is education, right? If you have to educate somebody about your product and explain to them what it is, you'll go broke because that will cost you millions. The cheapest and best way to sell your product to a consumer is on the packaging or is on the shelf. And then people go, I understand that, and put it in their trolley or their bag or whatever.
Keep it clear. That's a really good point. That would obviously be one thing, but what in your view makes a good brand?
I think a point of difference is the main thing. And nowadays, especially since COVID, it has to be healthy. It has to be something that, that is going to give you something more, not just necessarily, if you're going to drink something, make sure it's got something in there plus. Otherwise, you might as well drink water or whatever you're going to do. Make sure it's got a point of difference that will cause people to cross the road. Successful brands, people cross the road to buy. And
on the flip side, a bad brand?
Oh God, have I seen a lot of those?
Yeah, I bet you have.
One of the things, the guy who owned Honest Tea, and I just after he'd sold it to Coca-Cola for 200 million, I had lunch with him, and one of the things he said that stuck in my mind is people buy for health, they return for taste. So that's a good example of bad brands that fail. That if something is really healthy but it tastes horrible, people will buy it once, but they won't keep buying it.
And as an industry, we're going through massive changes in farming at the moment. The entire subsidy system is filtering off and adapting over the next 7 years. And there is a lot of talk at the moment about added value and diversification in farming. A lot of businesses will have been doing this for many years. A lot of businesses will be just about starting to think about it. But some listeners might be wondering how they can take their commodity crop, for example, to the next level by adding value in some way. How might creating a brand, how might that help them?
I don't know. One of the things I did want to say was in Sweden, and a lot of the oat milk, etc., that's come over here. All the plant-based milks, etc., have come over here from oat, and all the things that we grow that we could do. Nobody's doing it in the UK, and yet you look at companies like Oatly, worth a couple of billion, and it's not complicated making oat milk, etc. Another example I wanted to use is Blue Sky. Blue Sky is a botanical company that we go to, who are very, very clever. And botanical extracts at the moment are just the way to go. We've just launched a drink here based on stinging nettles. And it's a fantastic tasting drink, but it's really good for you. And it's actually based on stinging nettles. So, I mean, that gives you an example of something that's growing on a farmer's land that he hates.
I was going to say that is one committed grower. Yeah. Rather him than me.
It's really hard getting pickers. I think you've got to diversify, and Blue Sky is a good example where they're growing elderflower and different things, and then that developed into them making extracts. So it's thinking outside of the box, and I've seen so many businesses during COVID. Well, there's a lot gone bad, but there's a lot that have just thought outside the box and absolutely blossomed. In any business, you have to move. You can't stay the same. When people come to me with drinks that start off being really successful, and then they just peter off. And the reason being is because you've got to keep innovating. You've got to keep evolving. And in any business you do, you can't expect to do the same thing day in, day out, and it's still expected to be an audience for it. You've got to innovate and evolve.
When you mentioned that food and drinks is booming, but how crowded is the market? How much room is there for new entrants still?
Well, there is room for new entrants because a lot of the old crappy ones are going out the door. People don't want to drink, the sweet sort of unhealthy drinks like they used to. Back in the days when people were going in and out of the city or going into town and they were, buying their sandwich and quite happy to drink a Coca-Cola. Now they're at home or whatever, reassessing what they want to drink and what they want to eat, and they're starting to care about the food they put in their body. Yes, a lot of people have had increased alcohol during lockdown, but there's also a lot who are now out running and doing something and caring about their body and their health because they just don't want to die.
Yep.
And so it's totally changed people's attitude. And so what's happened is there's a lot of products are falling by the wayside.
How does a startup identify what is unique about them?
Well, that comes down to research, and a lot of the market research is a lot of what we do. We've had people come in here and seen something that they picked up in Chile or somewhere like that and gone, wow, this looks like a great idea. And I'm like, well, have you researched anything? Have you understood it? No, but I like it. And my mum likes it. As I said earlier, Granny says it's a great idea. And so it's a lot more than that. You've got to research it and you've got to make sure that there is a market for it. And also you don't want to go into a market that's already saturated because you've got something that's bigger and better and cheaper. You'll spend millions and go broke doing that.
Let's talk about pitfalls, which you must have seen many of. What are some of the key mistakes that some startups make, which I'm sure there are many, but if you can just pick a few, and what are the dangers before you start your brand?
Years ago, I lived in Australia, and there was I went to a conference there, and one of the guys got up and he spoke, and the subject he was talking about was ways to fail.
Okay.
Right. And it's always stuck in my mind. And basically the bottom line of what he was talking about was take a thriving business that's making money and then start investing that money into a business you know nothing about. And it's pretty much guaranteed to fail. So you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing, you understand, and that if you're going to invest time and money into something, you've got to understand exactly what you're doing. And the internet makes it so easy.
How many food and drinks brands, this is something that listeners probably don't want to hear, but how many food and drinks brands fail within their first few years, or maybe within their first year?
A lot less that come to us.
There we are again.
No. It's the same as any self-employed business. After 2 years, about 90% fail. But the thing is, in this industry, you can burn a lot of money. So I've seen companies raise lots of money off family, friends, or wherever they've got them from, and then burn that money very quickly. it is a slow growth industry, food and drink, and you can't go at 100 mile an hour. You've got to take it gradually, and you've got to start, maybe with farm shops or smaller, don't go to the Tesco, Sainsbury's, stuff like that straight away. Cut your teeth on smaller places. And if you make mistakes, then you can apologize to these people and pick yourself back up again. And then when you finally feel confident that your product will sell and people will understand what it is, when it's stuck on the shelf next to lots of other products, then that's the time to go and talk to the big supermarkets. Usually I said people 2 years. And so that way you're not going to burn a lot of money to find out whether your brand's going to work or not.
Yeah. That actually links to my next question, which is about sustainability as well. For businesses who have perhaps been running something on the side for a few years, but are looking to grow it in a way that is sustainable. And I know that word is bandied around a lot, but are there any tips that you'd have to ensuring that you're not taking too many risks, perhaps, but you're risking enough?
From an environmental point of view, the big thing is obviously is plastic. Like do as little as you can in plastic. And every time I see something come through from big guys, small guys, or whatever, they're like, we don't want plastic. Give us less plastic. So that's always something that you've got to take into consideration, is how recyclable is what you're doing, and to make sure that there's as little waste as possible. But sustainable businesses, I have to say, food and drink's not something that you can make an income out of from day one. It's something that it usually takes about a year or something like that before your profit is above your costs.
And before we go, how do people link with you on social media? How do they find out more about you?
Well, the best one to go to is if they go to our website, www.brandrelations.co.uk. There's a lot of this sort of stuff on there. We've been doing a lot of blogs recently. They can see a lot of the products that we've worked on. I'm on LinkedIn as Richard Horwell, but it's not something I use a great deal of. And we do, as a company, we have social media, but my staff are too busy to be sitting on social media at the moment. So the best thing is brand relations, brandrelations.co.uk. And there you'll see a lot more of this sort of stuff. If there's anything you want to know, I'm getting to the stage where at some stage I'm going to start writing a book, because there's a lot of content in there now.
Actually, before we go again, if there's one key tip that you would give to listeners who might be slightly, maybe not concerned, but slightly apprehensive about taking the next leap, what would that be?
To educate themselves on what they're doing, to learn about the market they're going into, the market research, and just to understand what you're doing. Don't go listening to mum and dad and or uncle or aunts or stuff like that. What you need to do is go out there and see what the public is saying, and seeing out the people that are not going to be nice to you. And one of the things I find is, you give anything away for free, everybody tells you it's fantastic. You charge them money, you get the truth.
That's a good one. Well, that is all we have time for today. But a huge thank you to my guest today, Richard Horwell. And you can find out more about Richard's business and services at brandrelations.co.uk. Next time, we'll be talking veterinary and diversity in the industry with Navaratnam Parthiban. I hope you can join me then. But until then, have a great week.